welcome to the Stratford Board of Education Finance Committee meeting. It is Monday, June 27th, and I am Amy Wiltsey, Finance Committee Chair. I will call this meeting to an order and confirm we have quorum. I will also entertain a motion to accept the minutes from May 23rd, 2022's meeting.
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Proto, second by Lisa Carroll Fabian. Take a roll call vote. Mr. Proto.
Yes.
Mr.
Aye.
Hunter. Ms. Adele.
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy.
Yes.
Mrs. Corcoran. Yes. Ms. Carroll Fabian.
Yes.
Mr. Yes. And Chair votes yes. Thank you, everyone. I will entertain a motion to accept the minutes from June 6, 2022, our special finance committee meeting.
So moved.
Second. Okay. We have a motion for Ms. Corcoran, second by Mrs. Adele, and we will take a roll call vote. Mr. Proto.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Henry.
Aye.
Ms. Adele.
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy.
Yes.
Ms. Corcoran.
Yes.
Mrs. Carroll Fabian.
Yes.
Yes. Ms. Coopey. Thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to move to item C, discussion, information, and possible action. Budget transfers. We have no current budget transfers. Ms. Mangini. And I will entertain a motion to authorize the Chief Operating Officer and Director of Finance to make the necessary budget transfers to salary and benefit accounts and to pay other standard charges as part of the annual year-end closing process. These budget transfers may exceed $7,500. The Chief Operating Officer and the Director of Finance will report all budget transfers made to the Finance Committee and to the Board of Education. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. Second. Thank you. Any discussion? Ms. Fidel.
Ms. Mangini, I'm just curious if you could give us a little bit of a ballpark of where all these transfers will be going.
Absolutely. When I brought this to the board last year, they had some similar questions, but just so you're aware, this is simply it's a common practice, but it's also to help us abide by what the financial controls audit requested of us, and that's to not leave any of our account line items in deficit. I will tell you that there are board policies out there. For example, if we had a $10,000 deficit in one salary line, but a $20,000 remaining in another, if at the end all salaries were in the black, we wouldn't actually come to you to make those transfers. The board policy would allow us to do that. Here it's a little bit different, so that sometimes some districts do handle it differently. This will allow us, for example, first I want to clarify by saying we are not doing any purchasing with this action. You know that we have about $1.5 million in our salary reserve line. We would be taking, for example, that dollar amount, transferring it to clinical costs to cover that deficit. We will take utilities. I've been reporting that the natural gas accounts are running in deficit, but we know there's electricity savings. So we'll be taking the electricity balances, moving those to offset the natural gas deficits. So it's just movement like that, with most of it being in salaries and benefits.
Mr. Proto.
Pam, will we be moving monies within categories? So a utility surplus to pay a utility deficit, a clinical cost surplus to pay a clinical cost deficit, or will we be cross-pollinating accounts?
Normally, then we do try to keep it within the same categories, but as you know, our special education deficit is so large that we can't do it within categories. So we will be moving whatever is left in salaries and benefits like dental savings that I've been reporting on that will have to offset tuitions for special ed clinical costs. So we will be moving it from category to category. But we will first try to stay within categories.
That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah.
If we're going to, so special ed will be the last move.
Correct.
For all intent purposes.
Correct.
Sure. So I think you'd say we don't necessarily need to count it as a transfer if we're staying within categories.
We do, because we don't have a board policy that allows me to do anything differently.
Okay. I mean, at this point in time, shouldn't we know, kind of have a pretty good idea of where these things are going, and wouldn't it make sense for us to at least have some information as to where this money is going? I mean, this kind of just an open-ended, every other transfer we've made has had some information to go along with it. This is kind of just a random $1.5 million, moving around.
Well, you can look at it from this perspective. We have significant deficits, as you well know, for clinical costs, tuition, transportation, just solely due to special education. So we need to cover those, and we are working to do that. We believe we're going to be able to with existing balances in each account. And then I described the utilities. Obviously, the natural gas will be covered by some savings in electricity. So most of it, to Ben's point, will try to stay within those categories. You will see that oftentimes, for example, as we come towards the end of the year, we may have some employees who took some leaves over the last few weeks, so they didn't get paid for them. So as we close out the payroll, close out encumbrances, there could be some savings in those lines. But alternately, there are line items in salaries right now that have small deficits, so we need to clean all those up. So rather than come to you with about 5 pages of transfers, this is just the housekeeping. Again, we're not taking money from one account to another to make a purchase. We're simply clearing up contractual obligations like salary, benefits, utilities, and special education costs.
Oh,
And every line item will be presented to you.
But you already know where they're going for the most part.
For the most part, but we haven't completed the fiscal year yet, so we don't know all of them.
So, I mean, for me, it would be nice to see those numbers before I agree to transfers. I mean, you know it, I don't know why we can't see it, so it's just.
Well, I think we can.
Where?
If we look at the monthly financial report, I understand it's for May only, through the end of May. Obviously, we're not gonna get June's until we close on June 30th. But as I look at the current available balances as for 21-22, you can see where the deficits are, and what deficits need to be filled. Those deficits will either increase or decrease for the month of June, depending on how we pay out or where we move for these. So I think we can see where the deficits are, and we can see where the balances are. I'm anticipating that the salary balance is going to be probably significantly lower for the end of June, even with some offsets for folks who may have taken time or whatnot. The same thing on the benefit side, although probably not by a lot, given what the monthly is versus where we are. So I think we can see what where our deficits are. Those deficits, some of these other accounts may move into deficit in June because they have low balances. The question is, where do they come from to fill that? I think looking at, for instance, line 300, the purchase professional services is just over $2 million in a deficit, and the tuition at 560 is just over 1.4 million. Those are the ones I assume you'll fill last.
That's correct.
And as we go through the other deficit areas, you will fill from within the unit group, the 400 group or the 500 group or whatnot, and then move to fill into those other 2 deficit areas from surpluses in various accounts.
That's absolutely accurate. The only thing I would add is, for example, on page 2, if you look at 100 teacher salaries, there are various accounts that make up that total line. For example, it will be the teachers at Chapel, the teachers at Second Hill Lane. Some of them could be deficits, some of them could be surpluses. Those are the things we're going to adjust between categories. To Ben's point, that's exactly what we will do. Stick to salaries first, benefits work our way down, and then obviously it's going to be the special education that will take it from a little bit from everywhere.
After those adjustments are done, is there a report that comes back to the full board?
Absolutely, you will get, like you did last year, a complete listing of every single transfer that was made between categories, between accounts.
If I recall, last year you had sent that to us well before the July meeting.
It was, I believe it was closer to August, and the
Oh.
reason for that is because we have to have all of that done by July 30th so that we can get going on that big state report, the EFS report.
July, August.
It's okay, it was close.
Are there any other questions with regard to this motion? Okay, we will take a roll call vote. Mr. Porter?
Yes.
Ms. Cupie? Ms. Carol Fabian?
Yes.
Mrs. Corcoran?
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy? Ms. Liddell?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
Yes.
And chair votes yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, financial reports. Ms. Mangini?
Yes, you do have the report that reflects our financial status through May 31st. You'll see that the deficit continues to get smaller. I am cautiously optimistic, as I reported last month, that we are going to be able to absorb that, and it's primarily due to continued vacancies. We have a number of building subs positions we've never filled, CIAs, we have numerous positions still open. Unfortunately, the savings on the positive side is helpful. The stress at the schools is not, so we're hoping that this problem mitigates itself going into next year. Nevertheless, we also have recognized savings, as I've reported previously, with regard to dental benefits. We anticipate a savings there. We're also closing out some purchase orders over the last few weeks that things have changed, even in special education. We get a report monthly on student attendance for our outplacements, and occasionally students could have missed a period of time, they could have withdrawn, and we really are lagging with that information. It usually takes at least 30 days to get those invoices, so that's what we are adjusting. We get emails from the PPS office daily about please increase this purchase order, reduce this purchase order. So we are trying really hard to keep that as tight as possible. So as we tighten each and every area of the budget, we are recognizing a little bit more in savings here and there. So we're hoping to have a year that we're at least slightly in the black, and that's been our goal all along. So some good news there, actually.
Any questions for Mrs. Mangini? Okay, thank you. Dr. Conley, grants update?
Sure. Good evening. There's nothing unusual in the grant report. You got it in your packet. Nothing stands out as something to report on. There's one new grant, the last one that's listed, and that is a PEGPESIA grant, if that's pronounced correctly. I've heard it pronounced a half dozen different ways. It stands for Public Educational and Governmental Programming and Educational Technology Investment Account. It's a small grant that goes statewide to educational institutions and nonprofits that is used for technology. And so it was $24,300 this year for us, and we're using that to buy about a half dozen new smart boards for Johnson House. Okay? There are two new awards on the way that aren't listed in the grant report. One is the one we talked about last time, the ARP after school and summer program that we discussed. It will include special education students. It didn't make the grant report this time because the state's been moving just a little bit slowly, and so it wasn't finalized until the 1st of June, and this report closes May 31st. So we do have that. It is final. It just didn't quite make the report. And the other one is we got a small special education stipend. Again, that was available to districts statewide. It's $15,000. Again, it wasn't finalized till June, but it's $15,000. $10,000 of that goes to help with our clinical costs, and $5,000 of that goes to professional development for our special education CIAs. Okay? Other than that, we're closing out the year, and we're preparing to send in a federal grant tomorrow to the U.S. Department of Justice for a 3-year anti-violence program in the schools.
Do you know the ask?
Excuse me?
The ask on that?
$1 million over 3 years.
Okay, does anyone have any questions for Dr. Conley? Mr. Porter?
I'm sorry. The last one you just talked about that you're applying DOJ for.
Yes.
Is a school violence.
Anti-violence,
And
correct.
With that, we have currently the school violence prevention program grant.
Mm-hmm.
Is that part of that program, or is that a different
It
program?
is a different department within the Department of Justice.
Of course it is.
Different division. Yep.
Why not?
That is from what they call the COPS division, the one that we have already, School Violence Prevention. This one is from the Bureau of Justice Assistance.
Of course it is. Okay. we'll go with that.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, so the Art Besser grant, what exactly, do you have like the legislation what that can be spent on? Is it, you know, 3, 4 items, is it pretty detailed?
The big Art Besser grant for the 13 million we've got left, yeah. It's, I could send you a one-page summary of what can be spent on it.
Okay.
Yeah, the full legislation is buried in a lot of other federal legislation. ESSER education was just one part of the American Rescue Plan. But there is a cheat sheet that's
Okay.
one page of what you can spend it on and 2 or 3 about the entire grant.
So the 13 million, is that the total grant, or is that just this year's expenditures?
Well, it's 13 million is the total grant.
Okay.
And I don't believe we spent any before this fiscal year.
So, I mean, because this year we've encumbered about, or we will spend about 1.6 million,
Mm-hmm.
which leaves it almost $12 million unspent.
Correct, but that runs through 2024.
Yeah, I know, but,
Yeah,
well, it's a 3-year grant, right?
right.
So-
Well, yeah, technically, sure.
So it's a 3-year grant, the first year we spent 1.6 million of 13.
Right, that's because we were trying to spend ESSER and then ESSER 2 before we get to ARP because those expire first.
Okay.
And I would just remind the board that there is over $5 million earmarked just for salaries for the next 2 years out of that allotment as well.
Right, much of the planned expenditure from ARP ESSER was for salaries or capital projects that weren't scheduled to happen until 23 or 24, so we didn't want to go ahead and spend the money.
Okay. So can you get the cheat sheet, can you send it
Sure,
over to us?
happy to do so.
And then just what our intended, what our intentions are with the balance of the funding?
Sure. There's a one-page cheat sheet as well that breaks down all the buckets in which we divided the money.
Okay,
And we can send that as well.
all right, thank you.
All right?
Any other questions for Dr. Clement? All right, thank you very much.
Sure.
Special education report, do we have Mrs. Davis?
No, Ms. Borges is on well-deserved vacation this week, so with her family. So she asked me to cover for her, which I'm happy to do. She did provide you with her financial status report. I don't think there's anything new there that you haven't been seeing all along, and it mirrors our main financial report. But she did highlight that we do have over 1,300 students with exceptionalities throughout the district, and we do have 107 students currently outplaced. So there hasn't been any significant movement in either area. She continues to struggle, as I noted earlier, with filling positions such as classroom instructional aides for our special ed student needs, as well as just special ed teachers, and all positions within that department have really been challenging this year. So she is on top of it, though. All good.
Does anyone have any special education questions?
Just a request, and obviously Heather's not here, so, of the 1,322 students, if you could give us the number at our next meeting of how many of those students have left the district at the end of the school year, either through a graduation program or they've aged out or whatnot. I think that will be helpful as we move forward into the next school year, next fiscal year and the next school year. And also, if you could give us a historical, maybe over the last 3 or 5 years, of what the percentage increase in special ed students was from October 1 through June 30 of each of those years. That I think will be helpful to us when we get to February of 2023.
Great, happy to put that
To
together.
try to see if we can't minimize some of this deficit that we seem to continue to run. And some of it, I think, is on us for not budgeting properly. Some of it is clearly on folks who are coming into the district and where we've been over the last few years. One we can control, one we can't.
You got it.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question. I do remember asking it and learning that in 5 years we went from a district of 8% to 16. So it would be interesting to see that trend.
Right. And that's on a year-by-year, or the historical on a year-by-year. Please.
Got it.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mrs. Mangini. Now, Item 4, food services report.
Yes, you do have that this evening. Once again, we continue to move in a very positive direction. We are about $1.2 million with a year-end balance at this point, which is excellent, something we haven't seen in a long time. But again, I will caution us, while we can celebrate the moment, we are getting a much higher reimbursement rate because of the seamless summer option program, and that does end on June 30th. But we're gonna just bask in the good news for a short while.
Are we allowed to roll our surplus over in the food service program to the next fiscal year for the program?
We can, there's a lot of regulations associated with it. We have to keep that money separate. And don't forget, out of that 1.2 million, we do have dollars in that belong to our families because it's money put on account for lunches. Coupled with that, we are required by the USDA to try to have up to 3 months of operating costs to be considered having a healthy program. We shouldn't have much more than that because at that point then we could be considered overcharging for lunches. And quite frankly, we might be at a point where we're actually undercharging. There is a pricing calculation that the state provides, and they haven't over the last couple of years, but we're sure we're gonna see it very shortly. So stay tuned, I'm sure I'll have more info.
Mrs. Corcoran, had a hand up first?
Is there any chance, I feel like I read something recently about the seamless summer program being extended, that they were discussing it in Washington, of course, I didn't read the article, I just read the headline. But is there a chance of it continuing? Because I know, we many families, especially when times are tough right now, and I know a lot of families have come to depend on, that.
If I may jump over to the CEP discussion for a moment,
Sure.
because it's kind of, with that, it's interesting because as I wrote your memo with the CEP information, on Thursday, by Thursday afternoon, I was getting information from my local Connecticut Association of School Business Officials. We have a legislative liaison, which is invaluable because he stays on top of all of this. He shared with us that there is a program that the government did just approve in Washington, and it's the Keep Kids Fed Act of 2022. And it's filtering through the State Department of Education that will in fact allow some funding to come our way. We're not sure exactly what it's going to look like, if it's going to provide free meals to all students. Having said that, I did work with Alan Dean from Sodexo. He and I seem to have the same take based on the information that's available as of this moment. I am scheduled to participate in a meeting with CASBO tomorrow to get some additional information that the state is disseminating about it. But at this point, I'm gonna back up just for a moment to share with you what I wanted to talk about a little bit this evening and then get back to that part of it. The district elected to participate in the Community Eligibility Provision Program back in 2018. Based on numbers of free applications, the board at the time determined that 6 schools were eligible, 6 elementary schools that had the numbers that fit into the program. As some of you who've been on the board for a few years may recall, we did recognize when I arrived and started to look a little further into our existing deficit that this program was actually adding to the deficit. Nevertheless, at that time, our total of those 6 schools for something called an identified student percentage, and I know this gets really technical, but we'll just concentrate on the numbers. It was around 45%, and what the state normally suggests for this program is that you be around 55% because that's when you more than likely won't have a cost to the district. Obviously, we're below that. Ultimately, we did have a cost. So right before COVID really hit, we started talking about what should we do? Should we narrow it down to 3 schools because we thought we could do a break even? We didn't really know what to do, but we didn't have to make that decision at the time because we had this seamless summer option. So for the past 2 years, it hasn't been a problem. Lo and behold, on June 9th, we got a communication, from the state asking us, are we continuing? And they wanted to know within a week. I asked for a little more time. They were gracious. I've worked with a woman at the nutrition office for many years, and she did a little more explanation. So fast forward, at this point, she suggested that we take a look at what's called our direct certification lists, which come from the state, and it's identifying families that because of SNAP benefits or other benefits that they receive, they automatically have their children get free lunches. That list has increased. I don't think that's a great big surprise with what's going on in the economic climate right now. So the state rep suggested that we rerun our numbers as of June 8th. We did. As a result, as I shared with you, we are now at 54.5% of that ISP number with those same 6 schools. I mean, that is like almost a 10% increase over the last few years. It's a significant shift, and it equates now to us being able to claim over 87% of the meals as free and 12.8% as paid, which just really means we get a higher reimbursement percentage.
87% of those 6 schools, or 87% of the entire district?
Just of those 6 schools, because the other schools just don't meet the
fall into
threshold. So I was prepared this evening, after discussing this with Dr. Sunday, to tell the board that we are just going to continue on as we have been with these 6 schools. And we are still planning to do that. However, I think we may be able to get help for our other schools. And that's what I'm looking at through this, what they call the Smart State Program. They believe that there's going to be funding. If you're in CEP, you have to stay there. If we had 100% CEP, we wouldn't be entitled to any of that money. But because we've only had it at the 6 schools and we're staying with the 6 schools, we should be able to get some support for the other schools. I can't tell you that definitively at this point, but I am doing everything possible to get as much information, and they really are trying to, the state is trying to clarify how they're going to manage this and disseminate the funds as well, because I'm not so sure they're 100% clear on that yet either. So stay tuned. But I just wanted the board to understand that we are going forward, continuing with CEP, unless suddenly that option is available to all schools again, that we've been under, but I really don't see that happening. And Connecticut did put aside, I think, $30 million for this program. I think they were trying for 60, and then it was reduced, which is, I think, why they're trying to figure out how that dollar amount is going to fit into the program. I know that's a lot of info to give you, but if you have any questions, I'll try to answer it. I shared with Dr. Sunday that I knew nothing about the CEP program when I arrived here, so I've learned a lot. It's all good.
Does any board member or committee member have a question for Ms. Mancini regarding food services?
I just want to clarify, because it is a lot of
It
information.
is.
So there's 6 schools that fall under the CEP program that will be free breakfast and lunch, or free lunch next year.
Correct.
And then the other 7 schools will be under this Kids Fed Act plus the
It's all
state funding, okay.
And I want to
If we
emphasize
get it.
potentially.
If potentially, if we get it, okay. So, okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much, and we will move on to enrollment status.
Okay. The enrollment has actually pretty much stayed static. I think we've actually decreased by about 16 students this month. I don't think that's all that unusual, in that looking at previous years, we do have a lot of people families who do move towards the end of the school year, some of them a little bit sooner, and this report is as of June 3rd. But nothing in any of the schools that's significant. It's like 3 to 5 students in each of the schools as I reviewed it. So pretty much the same.
Mrs. Colbert, how is kindergarten registration looking?
It's looking, it's been busy, it's been consistent, but so far our numbers are just about where they normally are. We're not seeing a large surge, which at the moment is very good news. But from my short time here in Stratford, it does seem as though summertime, like most districts, but here it does get very busy. So we're gonna watch this carefully.
Johnny?
Yeah, so, as of June 3rd, in district, our subtotal was 6840. Based on, you know, past history, are you seeing that number next year going up or down, based on, you know, the level of kindergarten?
I actually see it going up for not just the kindergarten, but I am being told that the registrations at the high schools appear, the students registering for classes, and all those numbers may not yet have been absorbed here because they're in the fiscal year 23. We seem to have more students that might have been at private schools or parochial schools returning, and I'm sure that has something to do with the economy at this point. I have seen that happen before in other districts, so.
Okay. So then we have the choice schools numbers, which in June of 2021 was 104, was 0 and 104, and then by the end of the year was 91 and 400. Are those, what schools are those, and what do you see as the driving factor for those numbers?
Those schools primarily are 6 to 6 magnet, those Fairchild schools, and the ones where parents are going to have to pay, which is not many of them, I think you will see those students, potentially some of them may come back because of economic issues. And with regard to the other magnet schools that our students are offered, I will honestly tell you, I don't have enough experience in this district under normal years since I arrived in COVID, and it hasn't gone away yet, to give you a real accurate answer, but I'd be happy to maybe poke a little bit more at our historical data.
Yeah, I'm just curious what, you know, again, what the driving force was.
Yeah.
Like, you know, we had so many kids moving to that area. And then if you could, maybe at some point, just what you foresee is what might be the, you know, based on past history, what you might see is what the next year's enrollment might look at.
Sometimes with some of the schools, like the BOAG or the agricultural schools, it's primarily because of the programs they offer that are attractive to students. That's probably where the 400 numbers come in, and then you have the 6 to 6 magnets that might be a little bit more unique.
And is that typical that we'll see though a shift like that?
I think so, and again, I wouldn't say that definitively based on my time here, but from other districts, and I've been with regional school districts that are probably a little bit more, see that even more. It does seem to increase over time.
It is, I can add to that, it's choice, right? So
Right.
ultimately, there are families who enlisted these choice options, magnet schools, charter schools, what have you, and if it's not a right fit, they will come back home. And for us, there's incentive, we want to make sure that our tax dollars stay within the parameters of our town and our schools. And I can share that probably about 2 months ago, I had a conversation with a parent who reported that the child would be returning next year because what they suspected would be the experience that they would have at the magnet school is not what they experienced. So it's truly a family choice, and for us, we'll certainly welcome those kids back.
But it's, I'm seeing it as though more of these kids are moving towards the magnet schools than the opposite. I mean, I'm sure some of them do come back, but it seems like a significant number from June of 21 till now shifted over to the magnet school. And if that's the sole program, but, you know, the magnet school option.
We can certainly look into that.
Was it a change in line item? Because it seems suspect to me that there were 0 students in choice schools as of June 1st, 21.
Well, if you remember, we began asking for that to be added to the enrollment.
Right.
It wasn't normally on this
Okay.
prior for
So that-
meetings. So they may not have that data.
I think it might have been, if you look down on the bottom there, Andrea, that same 104
Yeah.
was on the line below it. So I just think it was tweaking the report a bit, but I'll get clarification on that, definitely.
And also, Dr. Sunday, to your point, if you look at previous month's enrollment, it looks like we've had a decrease, meaning we've had a substantial number of kids choose to come back to Stratford. Mrs. Bedell, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask if that includes the parochial schools, or which one of the parochial schools fall under the is that under choice or is that under,
Best choice.
that's choice?
Correct.
Okay, any other questions regarding enrollment from Mrs. Mangini? Mrs. Mangini, since we had the discussion regarding community eligibility program, is there anything else that needed to be added for item D?
No, that was it. I just wanted to make certain you were aware of our intent with the program.
Okay, wonderful. Does anyone have any other business? Old business, new business? All right, well, thank you very much. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you very much. Meeting is ended at 7:06.